For the first time, Saudi Arabia has allowed women athletes to participate in the Olympic Games, to which I say, it's about time. Of course, there are plenty of old-fashioned male Islamists who think it's a sin for women to show skin. And sports simply goes against their nature, women's nature. Try telling that to a record-breaking Canadian women's hockey team. Of course, Saudi Arabia couldn't be too bold. It probably goes against their nature. During the opening ceremony, the women were not allowed to walk side by side with the men. Instead, they had to walk behind them, nearly covered from head to toe. Now, coming from a part of the world where women are still considered inferior to men, it's remarkable they were allowed to even show their faces. Sadly, this demonstrates the reality of well-being for most women in Saudi Arabia. Conditions in that oppressive country not improving. Women are effectively slaves to men. It's a type of thinking that died out nearly a century ago in most Western nations. So will Saudi women ever be allowed the privilege of walking side by side with men? Or is this tiny sliver of equality simply too much for Saudi Arabia to handle? Joining us is Ezra Levant, host of The Source here on the Sun News Network. As you monitor all things Saudi, it's the place with the non-ethical oil, as it were. What about the ethics of walking side by side? Do you think they might get that done in the next 50 to 150 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Saudi Arabia almost did not allow any women to go to the Olympics at all, even if they're covered in the full niqab, or as I call it, the full beekeeper. Or, I mean, these women are not even considered on the same legal or moral plane as men. Of course, in the eyes of liberals, men and women are equal in every way. In Saudi Arabia, there's many ways in which women are not equal. For example, a woman's testimony does not count the same as a man's in court. Women cannot get elective surgery without the permission of their husband/owner. They can't drive. They can't vote, of course. No one in Saudi Arabia votes. And under the Saudi constitution, which is the Quran, really, Sharia law, it's actually a crime for a woman to be raped. That's the crime of adultery. And in Saudi Arabia, women are punished sometimes with the punishment of stoning them to death. This is a terrible place, and the Olympics has given us a little glimpse into how they treat women.
Now, when do you suppose Rogue, great name for him, of the IOC will lecture the Saudis about maybe the next time they show up in the Olympics, women be allowed to walk side by side with men? When do you think that lecture will take place, Ezra?
Yeah, well, I am starting to look at the Olympic Organizing Committee the same way I look at the United Nations, which is a bunch of bureaucrats, and they look out at the number of countries out there. And numerically speaking, for example, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation has more than 50 member states. Those are Muslim and Arab countries led by Saudi Arabia. More than 50 of them. Compared to the Western democracies of Europe and North America, about 20. So I think Jacques Rogue is, in fact, looking at the numbers just like the United Nations does. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of the replication of the hypocrisies of the UN. Let me give you an example. The Olympics is supposed to be about brotherhood across all nations, race-free, just sport and noble ideals. Well, the Lebanese team, for example, demanded a curtain be put up so they didn't have to look at the Israeli team even practicing. An Iranian wrestler said he would rather forfeit his match than wrestle against a Jew. Yuck, Jewish germs. And a Tunisian athlete the same way. And a lot of these athletes, I bet they actually want to compete. I mean, they've been training their whole lives for it. But if they truck with the Zionist entity, that's what they call Israel, I bet you they'd get in trouble back home. Remember how Saddam Hussein's son treated the Iraqi soccer team? If they didn't do his political will, he would punish them physically, even kill them. So some of these athletes are actually political pawns of their dictatorship. So I don't even blame the athletes when they say, I don't want to deal with the Jews, yucky, because I think they're just speaking for their dictators back home.
Ezra, speaking of dictatorship and censorship, the secret society known as the IOC, Jacques Rogue's organization that's making out like a bandit on these summer games, netting well over $5 billion, while London is spending 14, 24, 34, 44 billion. Who knows what they'll be losing on the games. Here's the question. Censorship. Certain people are saying certain things. I guess they're commenting because they think they're in the free world, commenting on what's going on at the games. And Rogue isn't happy with some of the comments.
Yeah, you know what? If you sign up to a code of conduct voluntarily, like let's say you're an athlete and you sign some code of ethics and then you tweet something racially disparaging. The other day, someone from Switzerland tweeted something racial about a Korean athlete. That's fine because you signed up for the rules, and if you're being bad sportsmanlike, you can be subject to discipline. We have the same thing in professional sports in Canada. You can't shout at the ref or be rude. But for the citizens at large in England, in Great Britain, the mother of our democracies, the land of the Magna Carta for 800 years, that should be the freest Olympics ever. But there are all sorts of censorships going on. For example, just the other day, someone who was on Twitter criticizing NBC in the Olympics, NBC got Twitter to yank their Twitter account. Twitter's that microblogging site. That's outrageous censorship to be applied against a private citizen. And there's also craziness in terms of, I mean, I believe in intellectual property rights and those Olympic rings. I believe that if you built those up, you should have the rights to them. But seriously, going to a donut shop and saying you can't have 5 donuts like that or a sausage. There's a delicatessen that had their sausages in circle links. The intellectual property lawyers said to the deli owner, you can't have those sausages in the shapes of links. I mean, come on. That's taking the fun out of it. That's going way too far, and I think it's violating free speech, too.
Well, to the Krats on the IOC on that committee, I'm sure they think of the Magna Carta as just old toilet paper. Ezra Levant, thank you, as always.
Thanks, Charles.